Welcome to the Story of the Week podcast. This is the supplemental podcast to the supplemental podcast that goes along with the weekly morning newscast we do called Things You Might Have Heard, produced by the Conversation Project, and it's all a part of the More Better Media umbrella. My name is Jay Cleveland Payne, and what I'm going to give to you in moments in this podcast is a deeper dive into one of the stories that you picked using our feeds that we do for our morning shows, produce the supplemental podcast. We call that the weekly wrap up, the top 10 pure stories per your engagement on our Facebook and Twitter X feeds. We give you that. And the 10 stories, just go into detail, the 10 stories that were the tops this week, including these in reverse order. Number 10, man who crashed a new Chinese consulate in San Francisco was armed with knife, crossbow, police say. Number 9, Dwight Howard responds to haters over admitting threesome. Number 8, Hurricane Otis makes landfall near Acapulco as Category 5 storm, threatening nightmare scenario for southern Mexico. At 7, Jon Stewart's Apple TV Plus show ends, reportedly over coverage of AI in China. At 6, before Maine mass shooting, Senate approved amendment that would scale back veteran background checks for guns. The number 5 story, MTV EMA Awards canceled due to Hamas-Israeli conflict. And number 4, White Castle is rolling out fry cook robots across U.S. 3, mass shooting hits multiple locations in Lewiston, Maine. 2, Hurricane Norma heads for Mexico's Los Cabos resorts, and Tammy becomes a hurricane in Atlantic. The number 1 story per your engagement this week was Travis Kelce shells out millions for more privacy amid Taylor Swift romance. Top 10 stories per your engagement with our stories all week long. The top stories that basically came out from those 10, well, we take the stories and we put them out of order and we battle the headlines back and forth. And the top 2 stories to give us today was the number runner up, if you will. And that was the fry cooks becoming the new robots, or robots becoming new fry cooks at White Castle, where the plan was to talk about how the robots are not necessarily trying to kill us outrightly, but, take over our jobs and do what they're doing and feed us really, really fat stuff. The actual story that won this week for the Story of the Week has to deal with Jon Stewart and Apple TV, with the headline, of course. Jon Stewart's Apple TV Plus show ends, reportedly over coverage of AI in China. So we're going to go deeper into that story in just a moment. Remind you that you can find everything that we just talked about and how we got there in a much faster, more concise way by going to our website. This is theconversationproject.com. You can find details on what we do, how we do it, and all the promotional ad stuff. Less of that here because we did plenty of that to give you the countdown. Let's get into the heads up of this story. But just a quick reminder, our website, this is theconversationproject.com. Oh, email us at theconversationinbox@gmail.com as well for details on how to talk to us about doing things. So let's get in the story about Jon Stewart leaving Apple TV, or Apple TV getting rid of Jon Stewart. However you want to see that now. So the two groups have basically said it's a amicable break based on creative differences. Earlier in the month, Jon Stewart talked to his staff about the possibility of the show ending, and this week it basically officially happened. There's no news releases that I could see, no official things, because you don't really do that when things go awry. But essentially, the problem with Jon Stewart's new show that he does, or newest show, I guess it's the 3rd season this season, on Apple TV Plus, is going away. And there's a lot of issues that go into deep detail on why this is happening and why it sort of affects me as I'm an internet person giving my commentary to people who probably aren't listening, because that's essentially why Jon Stewart is leaving Apple TV. People weren't necessarily watching or listening to it via Apple TV. Now, back when he was on The Daily Show, remember, he was not the originator of The Daily Show, the original host. The original host was Craig Kilborn, and it was meant to be all about the funny. Jon Stewart came in there, kept the funny, but actually turned into something that was really biting commentary and actual news sources, to the point that people were using it as their news source. College students were essentially not watching the 10 o'clock news, but watching The Daily Show to get some idea what was going on, even though most of it was about the jokes, not the reality of the lifestyle. Now, from there, Jon Stewart, maybe not from the show itself, but Jon Stewart had always been an activist, always been really sort of in tune with what was going on. Remember, he famously blasted the folks on Crossfire about, how they were the worst thing for America, basically ending that show. When he left The Daily Show, because essentially he was burnt out on that and he did something else, he did some more things. He did a lot of things for charities, a lot of things for some causes, including firefighters from 9/11. And did little commentary things like this until he got this show from Apple TV Plus. Apple TV Plus is their little streaming service, their little box, so you can pay for various things out there. And there's a lot of things that are worth paying for. A lot of big time movies, big time shows that take the money that the subscription service gets and brings the eyeballs in to work on that end. Having a place like Apple TV Plus as your benefactor means you're not beholden so much to your sponsors. You don't have to get ad sales. People are paying for the service regardless. So everybody who pays essentially pays for everybody. And the more shows that people watch, the better. And the supplemental shows means if you're bored at something, you can check out something else. So while people may be paying to see Jason Momoa in Scene or other shows like that, the problem with Jon Stewart is the ratings were low. So if your ratings are low on the service and everyone's paying for it, it's not what people are coming for. Now, in theory, Jon Stewart's getting a lot of love in the social medias as clips of his things are popping out there all over the place, as did with The Daily Show as social media became a thing. But it's not bringing back viewers to Apple TV Plus to watch Jon Stewart and to watch big budget things they were paying for anyway. So that's a good reason to get rid of this show because it's not making any money. It's not, the morning show. It's not Reese Witherspoon fighting along with Jennifer Aniston in a soap opera drama that's based on some real morning show news drama. That's not what people are coming to see. It's not bringing people over to watch more stuff. And the other stuff isn't bringing people in to watch Jon Stewart specifically. Oh, by the way, since Jon Stewart wasn't making any actual money or bringing any viewers in, and the stories he was doing were kind of dry and nuanced, which means, smart people were getting the information. That's another reason not to pay the money for those. Jon Stewart talked to his staff and said, essentially, they don't want to do what we want to do. What we want to do? Stories on topics that are kind of hard to do, that really make a difference, that you have to think a lot about, and then if you don't think about them now, may come up to bite us in the future. Coverage of stories on AI and what it actually is doing to us, may be doing to us, may not be doing to us, and what it may mean to the future of everything. I mean, we have various guilds striking because AI is taking away jobs or has potential to take away jobs from people in the entertainment creative business and maybe in the business of people who actually are saying real news, real stuff. I use AI personally to produce all of my pieces because it helps me read through things faster, helps me write things faster, helps me edit a lot of stuff, and pull data as another researcher. My AI is essentially a member of the team that has to be babysat a lot because the AI gets really dumb very quickly. But someone's always managing over the AI, and even often, as I do the daily thing, the things you might have heard of, I'll go into something and start reading pieces and realize it's missed a piece of really important information to set up the next line. But because it's just looking for highlights, it will skip out things like names and places and things like that you would read automatically in succession that aren't there. That's all that affects me, although I can overcome that with a little bit extra time. AI itself is not coming to kill us directly, but as we said in the story in the weekly wrap-up about the Fry Guys now being robot Fry Guys at places like White Castle, the way they are bringing in, technology itself is turning into something that means there are less need for less people to do less jobs. Supposedly, you can do better jobs or work on more higher power brain things, but in reality, you hire less people and you pay them less. That's what happens. Oh, China. China's a big deal. China's a huge freaking deal because China should be a sort of semi-competitor, one of those guys you play against in basketball or in football that you're trying to outdo every time. And every time they show up and you see them show up, you're about to get your hand handed to you because it's going to be a hell of a game. That's the way they should be. China is both an enemy and an enemy. The problem is not the Chinese people, as always. The people aren't so much a problem. It's the people in charge of the people. China as a government is dangerous. China as a business partner is dangerous. China as a thought process, kind of dangerous. And because a lot of people are sleeping on China, but at the same time wanting to get all the cheap things from China, it's an issue. And it's a detailed and a nuanced issue. And the way they treat people because they can is an issue. And the way they treat their workers because they can is an issue. And the way they treat us because they can is an issue. How Jon Stewart is going to develop any of these stories, I don't know because we won't see them for season 4. But because those were the type of stories that the problem with Jon Stewart wanted to cover, that was another reason for Apple TV to let them go. Now, whether Jon Stewart finds another benefactor or just pays for himself to do the stuff he wants to do, we shall see. The big thing about these things is these are heavily produced TV shows, heavily produced productions that need a lot of research, a lot of people to run things, and just the simple part of camera guys and teleprompter folks and writers. Yes, writers, those things there. Whether Jon Stewart can find some other place to go would be great. It also helps that people actually watch it and ingest it, and not just the people who think they're smarter than everybody else. The people who really matter, who are looking for this type of entertainment or introtainment, if you will. Folks like me who like this type of stuff and use it for research, use it for entertainment, use it because I can't have popcorn munchy movies all the time. I've got to have things that actually make me think about things to go forward. Things like that I would see. The problem? I'm not paying for Apple TV Plus because I already pay for about 5 different services and watch consistently 2 of them. One extra one comes in and out. The other 2 are essentially because the family watches them here or there, and they're not necessarily consistent. If it weren't for the fact that I did programs that meant I had to kind of keep an eye on other things that I don't technically care about, don't really need to know about, I wouldn't have to spend the extra money and turn it into a business expense to make it worthy of doing it because I wouldn't need it. I could sit in a corner, I can pull up a book, I can ignore the world and be fine. So my interaction with Jon Stewart and his clips have been from mostly YouTube or maybe Twitter clips. I saw a lot of the things he did during the pandemic time because that's essentially when the show started. And it turned into another bunch of folks wearing headsets and just sort of, spieling back and forth. In that way, it wasn't the greatest thing going forward. But when they went back to going to the desk, doing set pieces, doing actual produced content, it took off like gangbusters. Except it didn't. Because, as we said, the ratings for the show is low. People aren't paying subscription costs to see Jon Stewart. It's the opposite effect of what happened for Howard Stern. Back in the mid-early days of the satellite radio craze, Howard Stern was a very popular, very vocal, very vulgar guy on the terrestrial, regular airwaves of the radio. And that was right about the time, right before the essential mass exodus of the shock jocks, before Don Imus did his thing and essentially everybody who was a bit controversial got dumped, where he took the chance to go to Sirius Satellite and say, I'm going here, pay me some money, and listen to me say everything I want to say. And people paid money to go to Sirius XM Satellite Radio to hear Howard Stern. He is one of the few people that was able to pull that off. Many other people have their own channels on this platform as essentially added bonuses to get attracted to things. But many people weren't paying for one person to listen to them talk for 2 or 3 hours a day. And as he gone on, maybe only doing that 3 days a week with a lot of replays of things. Although when he does an interview and it gets commercial attention and it gets attention on social media, people go back to listen to it. That happens on Sirius, and Sirius now doing things on a streaming version, so they have that going on as well. That didn't work for Jon Stewart. Number one, it was a taboo thing that what Howard Stern was doing, so it meant if you pay money to hear him on the satellite radio, he can cuss more. He can say the dirty things he can't really say on the air and get away with it. That happened. Jon Stewart, I guess he cusses more, but it doesn't really make that much of a difference. For the Stern comparison, it was exclusive. You had to go find him to get him, and then people would go off and talk to him about that. Jon Stewart wasn't getting exactly that type of effort. Although, as we say, the social media was making it a bigger deal. It wasn't getting the same sort of love going forward. And Howard Stern is cheesy popcorn filler stuff that people throw money at because they just do. You don't really throw money at your local library unless you are a big patron or you are a person with a lot of money that needs your name on a library to show you're a big patron. That's essentially what you're getting from a service, as you call it a service, you will, in what you're getting from a Jon Stewart doing his type of commentary. It's a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot goes into it, and what you get is a solid meal, but not so much a steak dinner or a big fat juicy cheeseburger. It's not bad, pretty tasty, but it's not that extra thing. So why does this matter to anybody? To me personally, you're listening to a guy who's rattling on the internet with commentary, with ideas, with thoughts, trying to do his conversational thing. That's my tag, my shtick, where we're bringing more conversations to people on things that aren't necessarily the right way to say, right thing to think sort of things. Trying to bring some nuance where if you're hearing something and you think, that doesn't sound exactly right, someone can say, yeah, because they're missing this one point. You can move on with that. Or if you're hearing something as the greatest thing ever, and behind the scenes is like, well, it's great, but they also do these things here that people don't tend to like. Without that nuance, without that extra going on, you really are losing pieces of the story. And that's what Jon Stewart is doing, except there's little entertainment market for it. Infotainment, things that make you laugh and giggle. The Daily Show, which is about the jokes primarily, yes. Looking at something like John Oliver's Last Week Tonight, where it's the similar thing, but right now that's really biting commentary, but it really is more about the jokes of the biting commentary. It is, in effect, taking the weekend update from your Saturday Night Live and turning it into something that is actually good content, actually something that's entertaining, but tells you something in the process. Jon Stewart, of course, and John Oliver, both alumni from The Daily Show and working there as well. So it's similar things. Jon Stewart is more of a serious, cerebral guy, believe it or not. And so because of that, he's dealing with the stories not from a funny standpoint, like, Congress is bad. They're really funny bad. Let's make it a joke about it. These are things that aren't jokes. Jon Stewart, the problem with Jon Stewart is things that are actual problems that we're not seeing in the light that he believes they should be seen in today and where they can be going forward. So, with that, where do we go from here? Is there a venue for smart stuff like Jon Stewart? Sure, you can go to some sort of streaming service where they do documentaries and they do great shows that are things on the underwater reef and baking and World War II casualties and whatever it is. And you can pay for stuff like that. Those stuff need to be produced, and those things need to be produced. Those things need funding to produce them, and they work out. But is journalism, faux journalism, commentary journalism, satire journalism, is that what needs to be? HBO, which produces the John Oliver show, is also a premium service where you pay up front for a bunch of stuff. And John Oliver is one of those things that are there. Somehow, some way, HBO Max, what they're called, is making their money off of John Oliver and his stunts, even though the parent company doesn't seem to be making money on anything and is trying to seemingly offload many of his assets in the process. Apple TV easily offloaded Jon Stewart as a asset, if you will, because in the grand scheme of things, not really worth the effort. But will we still get Jon Stewart out there? Sure. Somebody's going to pay Jon Stewart to do something. Somebody's going to pay him to go on the road and do some comedy so he can get some stuff, make some money, and pay some side producers to do some things on the side. Someone's going to take his name, his stature, and his gravitas and turn it into something and, pay enough money to pay for producers and side guys to work on some things on the side. Will he have a platform as large as Comedy Central? Maybe larger, because Comedy Central is still basic cable. Well, there's a platform as large as Apple, and by default, Apple TV Plus. Maybe so. Apple TV Plus actually isn't one of the larger scale of streaming services, because it is, based on the Apple ecosystem, so it has those issues as well, even though it does bring in people and is tied to people with the Apple ecosystem, part of what brings it in there. But he can easily get a larger audience from the Apple TV Plus. But will it be as lucrative? Simply as lucrative, because you're getting money in and not so much dealing with subscriptions or the big thing, advertisers. We shall see. When you have to pay someone to do the things, the people paying for it have some sway. The person who's buying gas may get consideration for the music in the car. Sure, the driver of the car and the owner of the car, because it's theirs, but hey, if the trip's not happening because someone was out of money and someone's ponying up, then that's a good reason to let them pick, or at least limit what's being played on the long road trip. because it should be. It's something for consideration. Will we get more Jon Stewarts out there? Hopefully so, because I would like to say I'm working my way towards something along the level of what he's producing, some sort of level on that end. And although fame and fortune is escaping me right now, I think I have a pretty solid start to what's going on. Ums and ahs, notwithstanding. Will we get more Jon Stewart himself and people working for him, with him, on smart ideas being produced out there in a way that allow you to both think and laugh at yourselves and the situation, but also realize the situation is serious? I know he will. Jon Stewart will definitely put out more stuff. How we'll get there, we don't know. Will you be willing to pay for it, directly or indirectly? That's the question for all of us. As media itself is harder to come about because people wanting to pay for media, whatever it takes, even just the time it takes to consume it, has been much harder in these current days out here in these streets of the social medias and the TikToks. So for the problem with Jon Stewart, the problem is it didn't fit its masters of Apple TV Plus. They kind of need to kowtow to China, and they kind of need to be happy about AI when Jon Stewart was ready to basically talk about how there are dangers everywhere in the things. And they are. So where do we go from here? I'm not exactly sure. We wait for Jon Stewart's next thing. Maybe you wait for my next thing. And we just wait to see if we get commentary that's going to be truthful to us, or whether the big overlords are trying to just keep us fat and happy, literally, by having robots feed us and having AI type of entertainment just make our minds into mush. That we'll just have to find out down the line. With that, we're done with the story of the week for this week. This week ending October 28th, 2023. Thank you so much for joining us for all of my podcasts, all of my videocasts, all our stuff. As we said earlier, we are homed on the website, on the web, at our website. This is theconversationproject.com. You can find replays of everything we do all week long, the videos, the news stories, how to find us at various places, including TikTok and YouTube Shorts. We drop small 60-minute hot takes all the time that we're looking for you to get into, plus some other information. For some reason, people don't like the evergreen, just sort of the what do you know information. They want the hot takes. So we give them hot takes. We give them commentary like this that we hope you enjoy. Email me at theconversationinbox@gmail.com to let me know if you're enjoying it, because we'll do more of this, more like this, and because it's the internet and I'm basically paying for it out of mostly my pocket, I probably won't cancel myself unless something more lucrative comes around. That's a promise. In the meantime, we always end all the conversation projects, informational things, with the slogan, stay limber, stay hydrated, stay on task. That's because we want you to stretch, make sure you have enough water going through, and be focused on what you're going to do, because life is a journey. It's not a one-day trip. It's not a short excursion. So make sure you're prepared for the long haul. We need you for the long haul, not to come up short in all the grand things you're here to do. Thank you so much for joining us for this podcast. Thank you so much for checking out the weekly wrap up. Thank you for being a part of the daily thing we have, not the daily show, the daily thing we have called Things You Might Have Heard. Go to our website to find links to the replays and where you can find them live as they come down. And be with us next week as we go to another story of the week. We won't know what the story of the week is until you give us your feedback on the feeds, on the daily news postings, and we get a weekly wrap up podcast show. So after that top 10 comes down, we'll tell you what story we decided of the batch to give you more of for the story of the week. I'm Jay Clifton Payne. Thank you so much. Signing out for this week.